Hare Krishna, thank you so much for having me. So, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So we're reading from the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, chapter 11, verse 36. Udama bhava pishuna mala valgu hasa vridava loka nehato madano piyasham samuhya chapam ajahat pramodatamasta yashendriyam vimathitum kohakairna shekuhu. Transliteration: Uddama, very grave; bhav, expression; pishuna, exciting; amal, spotless; valguhash, beautiful, smiling; vridha, corner of the eye; avalok, looking; nihataha, conquered; madanaha, Cupid, or Amadana, the greatly tolerant Shiva; api, also; yasham, whose; samuhya, being overpowered by; japam, bows; ajahat, gave up; pramad, woman; woman who maddens; uttamaha, of high grade; ta, all; yasha, whose; indriyam, senses; vimathitum, to perturb; kuhakahi, by magical feats; na, never; shekuhu, was able. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. Although the queen's beautiful smiles and furtive glances were all spotless and exciting, and although they could conquer Cupid himself by making him give up his bow in frustration, and although even the tolerant Shiva could fall victim to them, still, despite all their magical feats and attractions, they could not agitate the senses of the Lord. Purport by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. The path of salvation, or the path going back to Godhead, always forbids the association of women. And the complete Sanatan Dharma, or Varnashram Dharma scheme, forbids or restricts association with women. How then can one be accepted as the Supreme Personality of Godhead who is addicted to more than 16,000 wives? This question may be relevantly raised by inquisitive persons really anxious to know about the transcendental nature of the Supreme Lord. And to answer such questions, the sages at Naimisharanya have discussed the transcendental character of the Lord in this and in following verses. It is clear herein that the feminine attractive features which can conquer Cupid or even the supermost tolerant Lord Shiva could not conquer the senses of the Lord. Cupid's business is to invoke mundane lust. The whole universe is moving, being agitated by Cupid's arrow. The activities of the world are being carried on by the central attraction of male and female. A male is searching after a mate to his liking, and the female is looking after a suitable male. That is the way of material stimulus. And as soon as a male is combined with a female, the material bondage of the living being is at once tightly interlocked by sex relation. And as a result of this, both the male's and female's attraction for sweet home, motherland, bodily offspring, society, and friendship, and accumulation of wealth becomes the illusory field of activities, and thus a false but indefatigable attraction for their temporary material existence, which is full of miseries, is manifest. Those who are therefore on the path of salvation for going back home, back to Godhead, are especially advised by all scriptural instruction to become free from such paraphernalia of material attraction. And that is possible only by the association of the devotees of the Lord, who are called the Mahatmas. Cupid throws his arrow upon the living beings to make them mad after the opposite sex. Whether the party is actually beautiful or not, Cupid's provocations are going on, even among the beastly societies, who are all ugly looking in the estimation of civilized nations. Thus, Cupid's influence is exerted even amongst the ugliest forms and what to speak of the most perfect beauties. Lord Shiva, who is considered to be most tolerant, was also struck by Cupid's arrow because he also became mad after the Mohini incarnation of the Lord and acknowledged himself to be defeated. Cupid, however, was himself captivated by the grave and exciting dealings of the goddesses of fortune, and he voluntarily gave up his bow and arrow in a spirit of frustration. Such was the beauty and attraction of the queens of Lord Krishna. Yet they could not disturb the transcendental senses of the Lord. This is because the Lord is all perfect, Atmaram, or self-sufficient. He does not require anyone's extraneous help for his personal satisfaction. Therefore, the queens could not satisfy the Lord by their feminine attractiveness, but they satisfied him by their sincere affection and service. Only by unalloyed transcendental loving service could they satisfy the Lord, and the Lord was pleased to treat them as wives in reciprocation. Thus, being satisfied by their unalloyed service only, the Lord reciprocated the service just like a devout husband. Otherwise, he had no business becoming the husband of so many wives. He is the husband of everyone, but to one who accepts him as such, he reciprocates. This unalloyed affection for the Lord is never to be compared to mundane lust. It is purely transcendental. And the grave dealings which the queens displayed in natural feminine ways were also transcendental, because the feelings were expressed out of transcendental ecstasy. It is already explained in the previous verse that the Lord appeared like a mundane husband, but factually, his relation with his wives was transcendental, pure, and unconditioned by the modes of material nature. Om Gyan Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Gadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yata Padakamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Ragnatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Sarvadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padhan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanusate Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Mancha Kalpa Turubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Vacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So I'm just going to repeat the verse, just the translation. Although the queen's beautiful smiles and furtive glances were all spotless and exciting, and although they could conquer Cupid himself by making him give up his bow in frustration, and although even the tolerant Shiva could fall victim to them, still, despite all their magical feats and attractions, they could not agitate the senses of the Lord. In Bhagavad Gita, Krishna explains to us that those who understand the transcendental nature of my appearance and disappearance never return to this place again. They never take birth again. And Srila Prabhupada explains in this purport that, when we hear Krishna's pastimes, because they are transcendental, what does transcendental mean? It means independent of everything, means it can rise above everything. They can be a little confusing and contradictory. And, Krishna is independent. He's the beginning of everything. He is the source of all love. He is all attractive. There are so many different mediums through which people try to understand Krishna, and there are so many different, especially on the Indian film channels or TV channels, and you might get this in Africa as well. Maybe they transmit there as well. You get so many different serials about Krishna. And one thing I've seen is they really struggle to portray Krishna's pastimes. So understanding the transcendental nature of Krishna's pastimes, his appearance, his disappearance, is not easy. It cannot be understood by ordinary logic and reasoning, and not by the ordinary laws of attraction, which is exactly what this verse is explaining. But we are blessed by personalities like the sages of Naimisharanya, who come together to help us to understand the transcendental nature of Krishna's appearance and disappearance and his pastimes, so that rather than getting distracted, rather than getting or becoming critical and misunderstanding him, we are actually able to take that confusion and contradiction, and it further enhances our appreciation for just how independent, wonderful, and transcendental Krishna actually is. Because as Srila Prabhupada explains, we cannot understand any of this without association, because this understanding doesn't come from here. It comes from the heart. It comes from the spiritual heart, not the emotional, not the psychological heart, but from the spiritual heart. So, and Srila Prabhupada, this wonderful personality who, we must make sure we keep alive. We must make sure that we keep him alive through his teachings. We must make sure we keep him alive in our own lives through reading his books, through hearing his classes. He's made all of these teachings accessible to us. He's made it easy for people like us who perhaps have no background, may not have had any kind of even cultural affiliation with Krishna consciousness from an early age, who have maybe come from lifestyles where we never ever followed any of the regulative principles, but he's made it accessible to all and everyone, so that this verse, one who understands the nature of my transcendental appearance and disappearance, never comes back again, becomes very feasible. It becomes very doable. Something else that Srila Prabhupada is, explaining in this purport, he really sums it up really for us, is that sex makes the material world go round, but love makes the spiritual world go round. What is the difference? Krishna's in the center. What is love? Everybody's always asking, everybody wants love. We often hear, everybody's designed to give and receive love. So we understand this both about our human side, but also our divine side. And we're constantly balancing our humanity with our purity, constantly balancing our humanity with our divinity, constantly balancing our relationships on a human level with our relationships with each other, even on a divine level. Right? Every day we interact with each other, knowing that we are interacting with divine personalities, but we're often also balancing each other's and trying to deal with each other's human side. And what helps us to actually take it to a place of love rather than enjoyment, exploitation, or fear and avoidance is actually bringing Krishna in the center. So, this opening, couple of sentences of Prabhupada's purport, the path of salvation or the path of going back to Godhead always forbids the association of women, and the complete Sanatana Dharma or Varnashram Dharma scheme forbids or restricts association with women. Now, whatever body you're in, what Prabhupada's explaining here is whatever is the body that you're attracted to. So for men, women, for women, men, etc. But he also raises this point of Varnashram. And Prabhupada speaks about Varnashram in many places. And, if you break down, Varna is our occupation in this world based on our biopsychosocial nature and our training. And ashram is the stage of life we're at. But ashram comes from this, word ashraya. shelter, protective. And if we look at the varnashram system, even the ashram system, it's progressive. So it's progressive and protective. So varnashram, when we take Prabhupada's statements like this in full context, and it's important to do that. If you only pick one chapter of a story, you don't get the full picture. So you have to take things in context. So varnashram provides us with a protective and progressive framework to regulate our relationship with the opposite sex, whilst simultaneously increasing our affection and service for Krishna, which is exactly what attracted Krishna to his wives. It wasn't their beauty, even though they'd taken birth in direct association with Krishna, okay, on earth, even though they were very beautiful, they could defeat anyone with their glances and their beautiful smiles. But it very clearly states here that he was attracted by their service and affection. So this is what varnashram provides for us, a protective and progressive framework so that we can increase our affection and service for and to Krishna. Because actually, we understand that there's two things that transcend Varna and ashram, right? Being a Vaishnav, i.e. engaging in devotional loving service to Krishna, and also Guru Tattva, right? The Guru Tattva is independent of any Varna and every ashram. So, and Prabhupada speaks about this in a class he gives in 1974 based on the first canto, 8th chapter, verse 41. And he speaks about, even though these two positions are transcendental to Varna and ashram, we don't claim the position of a Vaishnava, because that's humility. No, a real Vaishnava never says really that they're a devotee, right? So we use the Varna and ashram system as a framework, and we climb upwards. So we actually become qualified to enter the heart and become a Vaishnava from the heart. So, how Prabhupada emphasizes in here that actually the way we relate to each other properly and really become free from attraction to all of this material paraphernalia. He gives the phrase sweet home, motherland, bodily offspring, society, and friendship, and accumulation of wealth, is that if we bring it under this framework of ashram, but relate to each other out of service, rather than this mood of bhogatyag, where we are either swinging between enjoying and exploiting each other or fearing and avoiding each other. What ends up happening is then we relate to each other in such a way that we don't make offenses, and we actually end up fulfilling both our human need for love and affection and validation, but also our divine need for love, affection, and validation. So both things happen simultaneously when we relate to each other in a healthy way in this varnashram system, particularly ashram system. Because sometimes, when we read purports like this, especially where Prabhupada's being, using certain language, two phrases here, forbidding or restricting. And of course, in certain ashrams, mixing with the opposite sex is forbidden. Because, as Prabhupada explains here, the whole scenario of a male and female coming together gives rise to certain desires, certain lifestyle, certain affiliation with this world. And in other ashrams, there's restriction. What does restriction mean? It means regulation. And whilst we have restrictions and regulations in terms of the externals of how we mix and relate to each other, higher than the externals and more important than the externals, I think, of how we mix and relate to each other is what is the motive and what is the mood behind how we relate to one another. So, this whole mood of bhogatyag, where we're 1 minute absorbed and completely attached and another minute running away and fearful, right? It's not healthy, whether that's with our relationships with objects, material objects, or with other people. Whereas coming from it with a mood of service, so just like we have with any opulence we get anything we get in our life where it's an object, we think, okay, how can I use this in service? So similarly, all our relationships can be looked at with this mood. And when we look at all our relationships with this mood, whatever ashram we're in, whether it's within our actual ashram or between the different ashrams, so how brahmacharis relate to grahasthas, how grahasthas relate to vanaprasthas, how vanaprasthas relates to brahmacharis, how do grahasthas relate to sannyasis, how do husbands and wives relate to each other at the different in the different ashrams, how do children relate to their parents and vice versa. When it's coming from this position of loving service that I trust that when I invest in serving you, Krishna reciprocates with me, even if you may or may not reciprocate with me in the way that I hoped, right? So when there is this respect and loving service, then we move away from these extremes of enjoy, exploit, or fear and avoid. Because when we move between enjoy, exploit, and fear and avoid, we end up having a lot of insecurities within our ashram system. For example, creating grahastha guilt, looking at something that is supposed to be progressive and protective and looking at it as a failure, right? We can't enter any situation seeing it as a failure. If we see it as a failure, then we won't engage with it properly, right? So while Srila Prabhupada here is very much telling us that, yes, we have this framework, use the association of devotees, associate with each other properly, and use that framework of varna and ashram to become progressively more and more affectionate and attached to Krishna. Associating with devotees means not offending them. Associating with devotees also means not being offended by them. What does that mean? It's in our hands whether we allow someone to offend us, right? It's in our hands whether we decide to forgive. And ultimately, if we're not offended, there's nothing to forgive. If we can become humble like this, then it's very wonderful. Because let's face it, in all our insecurities and attachments within our varnas and ashrams, sometimes we become very proud of our particular varna. Sometimes one particular varna is, depending on the season, is promoted more than another varna. We go through periods where it's amazing to be a Brahmin. Then you go through periods where, no, it's amazing. We need more Kshatriyas. We need more leaders. We need more of this. And then, oh no, somebody else says, no, we need more Vaishyas. We need more cottage industries and we need more businesses. And then somebody else is saying, no, we need more Shudras. We need people who are hands-on and can get the job done, Another time, somebody else is telling you, yeah, brahmachari and brahmacharini ashram is a way to go. Then somebody else gives a class and tells you, no, grahastha life is the way to go. Prabhupada said everybody should figure, and so on and so forth. One day it's vanaprasthas, another day it's, sannyasa. These are always changing. The parameters for what gives us strength, another way to just get distracted by the power and illusion or the false power and illusion this material world presents with us is always changing. But it's very clear in this verse that even if you take birth directly in association with Krishna, there is nothing material that we have that is attractive to him. At the end of the day, when it's time to decide whether we're going to switch our feelings back on for Krishna, he doesn't care what our role in this world is. He doesn't care what varna we were. He doesn't care what ashram we were in, how many times we've been in and out of different ashrams, that means nothing to him. Our beauty means nothing to him. Our intelligence means nothing to him. All he's looking at is, what did you do with everything I gave you? What did you do with everything I gave you? So these two words that Prabhupada describes, therefore, the queens could not satisfy the Lord by their feminine attractiveness, but they satisfied him by their sincere affection and service. Two things, affection and service. This is all based on, from Chaitanya Charitamrita, the verse that very nicely, sweetly describes pure devotional service. This text 167 from Madhya Leela, chapter 19. Anya Bilasita Sunyam Jnana Karmati Anvritam Anukulyena Krishnanu Shilanam Bhaktir Uttama. What does this mean? it's talking about three very clear attributes that our service needs to imbibe, that our mood needs to imbibe. First thing is, must be unmotivated. Unmotivated by bhukti, the desire for liberation. Bhukti as in the desire for material gain, enjoyment. Mukti, the desire for liberation. And siddhi, mystical opulences or mystical abilities. So unalloyed, there's got to be no other motivation, okay, other than service for the Lord. So completely pure, uncontaminated. The second thing, it's got to be constant. Constant means uninterrupted. It doesn't miss a beat. So not only is it not mixed with anything else, there's a constant flow of this service and affection. And last but not least, favorable or affectionate, favorable to Krishna. Not like Gantz, that is completely absorbed in Krishna, but unfavorably. You can't wait to kill him. I mean, his was uninterrupted, right? He also didn't want anything else. He just wanted Krishna, but it wasn't favorable. So it doesn't quite fit the mold. So, but in order for us to regain that level of purity, we must do two things. One is associate with each other in non-offensive but loving ways. So, but just saying non-offensive is not enough, because when we're just in a mood of, I don't want to be offensive, it's kind of like an avoidant position. I want to avoid the mistake. Now, imagine anything you've ever done. If it's in the mood of, I want to avoid making mistakes, what position are you in? You're coming from a position of fear, right? When we come from a position of fear, it's very disempowering. But if we flip it and say, okay, rather than avoiding mistakes and avoiding offenses, let me see how I can serve. Let me see how I can serve the Vaishnavas as if I'm directly serving Krishna himself. That means including those people who are closest to us, because the people who are closest to us, those are the gifts that we have sent by Krishna. And he's watching to see, how do you treat my gifts? And when we come from a position, okay, how can I love and serve in this interaction in a way that's pleasing to Krishna and Guru? Then it comes from an empowering place. So it's kind of like coming from a position of you start a project or you're doing something, you're thinking, how can I do this to the best of my ability? Not how do I avoid mistakes, but how do I do this in the best way possible? That is empowering. We can take this approach. I remember when I was growing up, I was never scared of doing exams. Because of one thing my mother told me. She doesn't even remember telling me this, but it really stuck with me. Is she told me one time that, when you go for your exams, it's not a test to see how many mistakes you make. It's an opportunity for you to showcase what you can do. And so I'd go into little tests going, yeah, I'm going to show them what I can do. That was my mindset. It was like, oh my God, I'm scared of making mistakes. So this is the thing, when we have this mood that, wow, Krishna's given me an opportunity to serve. Krishna's given me an opportunity to shine. Krishna's not giving me an opportunity to avoid mistakes. He's giving me an opportunity to really show him how much I love him, to show him how much I want to love him, even if I don't love him yet. Then it's very, very empowering. Just that psychology of that mindset is empowering, because it invites blessing. And not only does it invite blessings, but it makes us receptive to those blessings, because we're receiving blessings all of the time, right? The Vaishnavas, the Acharyas, those who are on this planet now and those who've come before them, they are always sending blessings our way. It's constant. Prabhupada set it up in such a way that we cannot avoid blessings. They're always flowing. The question is, how receptive am I to those blessings? Am I going to push them away out of fear? Or am I going to open my heart, knowing and out of humility that I'm not qualified, but hey, if you're going to give it to me for free, send it. Send it my way. I'm ready to receive. So this Anya Bhilasata Sunyam, this pure devotional service, first-class devotional service, without desires other than desire to serve Krishna, it is our natural constitutional position. What does that mean? It is constitutional. Constitutional means that's what we're made up of. We are made of Krishna Prem. Every single atom and molecule of our true self vibrates to that feeling. I love Krishna. What relationship that takes, what form that takes varies, but I love Krishna. And so then we love everything associated and everyone associated with Krishna. So we have a community in our permanent and real world, and we have a community here. So regaining our feelings for Krishna is really how we go back to him. We don't go back to him because of a change in space, because we can't leave a space which is all around us, because Krishna is actually all around us and within us. The spiritual world is all around us and within us. Right? We can't leave a time, can we? Was there a time we left Krishna? When again, he's still with us, and he is time himself. In every second, he's there. He is every moment. He says, time I am. And thoughts, this verse from Bhagavad Gita, man mana bhava mad bhakto, always think of me, become my devotee. So think of me, devotee is feels. Think of me and always immerse yourself in feelings for me. This position of where thoughts are even bypassed, or as in thoughts are completely controlled and absorbed in Krishna, comes from switching back those feelings for Krishna. So how do we leave the space that Krishna's in? How do we leave the time that Krishna's in? How do we leave our thoughts for Krishna? Is when we switch off our feelings for him. Because when we switch off, that's really the only way to create distance between you and a person, right? You want to cut someone off, you switch off your feelings for them, isn't it? If you switch off your feelings for someone, they could be standing next to you and it's like there's 1,000 kilometers between you. They could be looking right at you and you don't see them. They could be in your life all the time and you don't spare a thought for them and you have no time for them. But the minute your feelings are switched back on, there is no time, space, or thought that separates us from Krishna. Because when our feelings are true, real feelings, that rasa starts to wake up, opens up. From that is born our form, our service, the nature of who we are, our community, who our group leader is, all of these things. So, but do we want to switch those feelings back on? Or are we so scared of feeling that we just want to keep bringing it back to function, function, function? Because let's face it, in the spiritual world, if we look at them, it's very clear, evident in this pastime, in this particular verse, that actually Krishna, being the husband of these 16,108 beautiful ladies, their form, their service, and the nature of Krishna's relationship with them is born completely out of their affection for him, their feeling for him. These souls have appeared in his pastimes on earth as his wives because they switched on their feelings for him so much that no time, space, or thought could keep them away from him. And so Krishna reciprocates with their ras, with their feeling perfectly. Narad Muni is surprised at how many wives Krishna has. He's bewildered. He travels through every universe and part of creation, and he sees one of the biggest problems is when men and women get together, they seem to struggle to keep each other satisfied. Right? He's saying, how is he maintaining 16,000? What? I just don't believe it. And it describes very beautifully how when he goes to every palace, Krishna's there with every single wife simultaneously. And Krishna adopts a different personality for every single wife simultaneously. Why? Because that personality who switched on their feelings for Krishna again has done it in a particular mood, in a particular ras, and has their own personality. And in prema bhakti, God becomes the servant, whether he's your charioteer, whether he's your boyfriend, whether he's your husband, whether he's your best mate, whether he's your son. He becomes the servant. As in, he says, well, doesn't matter how we do this, I'm always going to love you more than you love me. I mean, think about it. When we switch off our feelings for Krishna, we say, I'm turning away from you, Krishna. I'm just going to look the other way. You can put layers of the mind, false ego, material elements, put thick layers of them so I can forget about you. But I'm turning away. Krishna says, okay, I love you so much. Not only will I follow you everywhere and wait for you for all eternity, but I will give you the facility to forget me. Who does that? Who does? Have you ever loved someone so much that in order to let them go, you gave them the facility to walk away? I mean, isn't it amazing? Isn't it amazing? Isn't he so wonderful? I mean, sometimes I wish he hadn't done that, but I asked for it foolishly, and where would the love be if there was no choice? So this regaining our feelings for Krishna, Prabhupada gives us the perfect process. Call him. Call him. Keep calling him until the crying out becomes heartfelt, until we get to a point where whichever varna or ashram we're in, we realize that, yes, I like all of these things, but I love Krishna. I love Krishna the most. Tirtha Maharaj, in his final days, very strongly spoke about, he would tell us that when the ordinary jiva is leaving the body and taking on a new one, the mind and ego don't put up so much of a fight. He says, because they come back. Your mind and ego, they're like a hard drive, right? They already take the form of the next body, and they're kind of like a transitional piece, so to speak. They exist. He says they don't put up so much of a fight. But when we have our final birth, the mind and ego put up a big fight because they know they're going to stop existing. And so we are presented with every single option to keep us here. And we have to systematically say no, no, no to everything, and ultimately say yes to Krishna. And so this relative attachment, Krishna consciousness is about relative attachment and affection. Ultimately, who are we most attached to? Guru and Krishna, or the things that we have here? Are we more attached to being Krishna conscious or having a career in ISKCON? And we're so used to equating our positions and things we have here, especially when it's part of the spiritual community, as a sign of spiritual advancement, that it's very easy to delude ourselves that I'm more attached to Guru and Krishna than I am to my position or service or career here, which is why we struggle so much when our services have to change, when our circumstances have to change. But ultimately, it's always going to be difficult, because even when we're in our ideal varna and ideal ashram, they still don't have the power to satisfy us completely. But we can accept that with sincerity, that, okay, it's my duty to be well situated. But ultimately, no matter how well situated I am, because of the nature of time, because of the nature of the material world, there is ultimately nothing here that will satisfy me, right? So because there's nothing here that we understand that will satisfy us, but we engage with it in a healthy way, ultimately what that does is we're able to move within these realms, use it as we need to, connect as we can in a loving way, but at the same time simultaneously deepen our affection for Krishna to a point where actually letting go of these things becomes very easy. Do any of you think twice about changing your clothes? No. They're just clothes. Look at actors and actresses. Do they think twice about changing outfits or changing scenes or changing sets on stage? No. They even play different roles in different movies. They don't think twice about it. They just move. They just transition. So this is mastery of our identity here. Is that whatever identity or whatever aspects of identity we have, we can drop them and adopt them as we need to. Doesn't matter if we're woman or man, rich, poor, famous, nobody knows us, beautiful. I mean, we go through all of these things all the time. every psychological, social, and physiological identity we have here is going to change inevitably. And so we need to be dynamic with our ability to balance, with our ability to offer Guru and Krishna the best of what we have, and not get so fixated on, oh, it can only be this one way. Because ultimately, when all our cards are on the table, we pick our favorite one. And if it's not Krishna's face on that favorite card, we'll go where our favorite card is, right? So we don't have to be so scared about forming affectionate bonds and loving relationships here. They will actually become our stepping stones to surrender. Because when Vaishnavas connect with each other in a healthy, loving way, the only thing we wish for each other is deepen your connection with Krishna. I wish for Krishna to send you all blessings. I wish for you to form the happiest, healthiest relationships with Krishna. I'll protect you from Maya. I'll always do what's best for your Krishna consciousness, even if it means I have to come second. Right? It doesn't matter what relationship that's in. So as we chant, as we associate with each other, let the mood of Krishna's 16,108 wives fill our hearts with affection, sincere affection, and service to Krishna. Because even if nobody else can see that sincere affection and service, the person who needs to see it is always seeing it. The person who needs to feel it is always feeling it. And the person who's receiving it will always reciprocate. And he's so magical, he'll reciprocate in ways that we can't even imagine. What we plan for ourselves is nothing compared to what Krishna wants to give us. Nothing. And one day we'll start waking up from this dream. When we're asleep, the dream completely controls us. As we start to wake up, we start to be able to navigate ourselves in this dream. And then we start to dip in and out of the dream. Then we change our purpose in the dream and start to help others to wake up, because we're more and more fully awake. So just in terms of being conscious of time, it's 3:45. Well, here it's 4:45. So I think we're about 15 minutes. We've got about 15 minutes left. I would love to hear from some of you, your questions, your comments, any complaints, maybe you have some corrections. Please, over to you, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you so much, Mother Chidi Shakti. That was a very beautiful, beautiful class.
Thank you.
Well, at this point, we ask devotees to use the hand emoji to raise their hand and ask questions if they have any. Mother, I have a question.
Sure.
You quoted C.C. Madhyalila, C.C. Madhyalila, I think 6:167. Sorry, 19:167.
Yeah.
Yeah, Anyabilasita.
Yeah.
Well, it says, let me read it, the translation. Sure. When first-class devotional service develops, one must be devoid of all material desires, nor obtained by monastic philosophy and fruitive action. The devotee must constantly serve Krishna favorably as Krishna desires. Is this just to tell the non-pure devotees, or is actually speaking to the pure devotees? Because I'm thinking that if one is a pure devotee, he automatically knows that he is serving Krishna without any motivation, without any interruption. Now, if somebody like me who is struggling to try serving Krishna, if I do not have any motivation, then it becomes very difficult for me to serve Krishna also, because there must be some sort of motivation to motivate me, to move me, to make me do whatever I'm supposed to be doing. I mean, sometimes I struggle so hard to go to work that there is the motivation that I need the money. And if I do not go to work, I'm not going to get the money. So because of that motivation, even though I might not be willing, but I go. So personally, I have some motivation. Of course, I know I'm not a pure devotee, far, far away. But is it wrong to have motivation serving Krishna? Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you. So I had two questions there. One is, who is this verse for? Who are verses like this for?
Yeah.
And one is, well, don't we need motivation?
Yeah.
So this verse, when it talks about, must be unalloyed or devoid of motivation, it's talking about devoid of material motivation. But the thing is, Krishna is very aware that regaining our feelings and attachment for him is a process. And from the point that a sadhaka decides, okay, I want to regain that mood, the motives are there, but the motives change. So this talks about when first class devotional service develops. Okay, first class, right? So just like we go from kindergarten to PhD, there's progress, right? It's progressive. There's changes taking place. The scales tip. So, and Prabhupada talks about this in the purports to the verses in Bhagavad Gita where Krishna talks about Varna. Prabhupada talks about how we must start by serving according to our Varna. So our motive originally essentially comes from what we like doing. As that gets further purified, we also go based on what Guru is instructing us to do. Guru Maharaj would often talk about this, that, yes, we want to do the needful, but we should also all be doing something that we find irresistible in Krishna consciousness, something that we would do even if nobody asked us to do, because it keeps things enthusiastic, keeps us enthusiastic and vibrant. So, but then Prabhupada also says that as you continue to do this, you become purified to a point where your happiness doesn't come from the activities you're doing or the position you have, but your happiness comes directly from pleasing Krishna. And then you can do anything for him because you're Paramahamsa. Okay. I remember with Gurudev, I was, in his final months, I was doing some emailing for him. And I was sitting at the table and I was typing, and he was reading a business journal. Now, this was a few days before it became apparent that he was definitely going to leave, and the cancer had deteriorated to that point. So he was still reading business journals because he was still in this mood that, okay, there's more preaching to be done. And I noticed him yawn, and so I thought, oh, maybe he's getting bored. And so I said, oh, Gurudev, do you want me to get you something Krishna conscious to read? I was so immature and childish. Do you want to get you something Krishna conscious to read if you're bored of that? And he put the magazine down and he looked at me and said, Chi Shakti, because bhakti is not about having fun. I don't enjoy 90% of the services that I do. So if it was up to me, I would just read and chant and engage in my bhajan, and that's it. He said, but he says, my pleasure doesn't come from these things, like, the 90% of the things that I do. So my pleasure comes from knowing that Guru's pleased. My pleasure comes from knowing Krishna's pleased. And that doesn't mean that I'm always psychologically or physically pleased. So he was really expressing that being transcendently happy is another stage to the spectrum. And he said, so don't think that bhakti is about having fun, and remember this for the future. So our motives, there's always going to be motive there. There has to be. What else is, but even in our pure devotional service, there's motive. I want Krishna's association, right? I want to serve Krishna. There's motive there. It's just our motive is progressive. Our motive changes from being very Varna or ashram based to then becoming purified and becoming more Krishna based, and Guru is like the bridge, because we need someone here who's pointing in the right direction. And by serving them, we then, I mean, you know all of this. I feel like you're just drawing this out of me, helping me to think. But this is then, it gets purified. So, actually the difference between a pure devotee and a, beginner is not always externally apparent. Even during arti, how a pure devotee and a beginner perform arti externally is going to be the same. But the pure devotee's motive isn't how many times do I have to do this? And, have I got my hands? They do that automatically. But their mood is when I go down there, I can't wait to see Krishna. And when they're offering flowers in the mood that is close to their heart. Flowers can be offered to Krishna in worship. They can be offered to Krishna out of friendship. They can be offered to Krishna in parental love. They can be offered to Krishna in conjugal love. And the mood is going to be different. But externally, unless someone's there themselves, you're not going to be able to tell the difference. So yes, motive has to be there, but it progressively becomes purified and changes. So this is what we're being invited by Lord Chaitanya, that look, once your motive is free of any loss or gain here, because all our motives here are all really based on fear that I won't get what I want or need, or fear that I'm going to lose what I already have, isn't it? And that fear is strong to the degree that our sense of who we are is rooted in our positions and opulences here. But as our identity becomes more rooted as a servant of Guru, as a servant of Krishna, and ultimately in our actual relationship with him, then this world becomes like, dipping in and out of a, drama. You dip in and out of a drama, actors don't get caught up in their roles. So that's like, I hope that answers the second part of your question. The first one, who is this verse speaking to? Surely pure devotees already know this. Actually, again, just like I was talking about how with Arti, two people are going to relate to Arti differently. Same with Shastra. Shastra is Krishna's words. So they're alive. Just like he's fully present in his name, he is fully present in every single word that he utters. Every single word he utters is like a zip file. You open it up, there's a whole bunch of stuff there that is just, you didn't even know was waiting there. And you don't even know how big those files are. So, but how it opens up depends on, again, our mood and our motive and where we're at. Because as he says, as one surrenders to me, I give them the knowledge of how to come to me. So in what we're reading, we connect with a different aspect of Krishna. As a devotee even wakes up to their personal relationship with Krishna, even then what they see in Shastra and hear and read, they relate to differently. Let me give you an example. Prabhupada explains in Krishna book that when he describes the fight, the wrestling match, right, in Kansa's arena between Krishna and Kans and Balaram and Kansa's, men. And he says that when everybody's looking at Krishna, watching him fight, some are thinking, wow, such a hero. He's so handsome. Others are thinking, yeah, go Krishna, my friend. Others are really protective. We hear the same thing about Govardhan pastime. We hear the same thing about the Kaliya serpent pastime. So same with Shastra. When we read a verse, what we see and hear and understand is very different according to how much our feelings for Krishna have been switched on. Even when, so sometimes we talk about I've had a few times I've been asked, okay, as we wake up to our rasa with Krishna, should we only read things which are to do with that rasa? Now, actually, when you have a particular rasa with Krishna, and the stronger that becomes, the more crystal clear that becomes, it actually doesn't matter which avatar of Krishna you're hearing about or which form of Krishna you're seeing. You can only see him and relate to him in that rasa. It's like, as a mother, I'll only ever see my daughter as my daughter, because in this lifetime, that bond of being her mother is so strong. I can't see her in any other way. I can try, but it's really hard. I might even be able to, even the whole trying to be her friend thing, I can do it for a little while. my mind still goes to, have you slept enough? Have you eaten enough? Because I can't help it. Okay, yeah, that's amazing, but are you okay? So this is the thing. If you love Krishna as a little boy, as a toddler, then you might be seeing him, his form in a picture as this handsome, muscular young man. He'll still be your little boy. You might be reading about Gurumadev, but you might still be thinking, wow, Krishna is so wonderful when you see? So actually, who's this verse for? Everything is for everyone. Krishna reveals to us based on where our heart is. So sorry for my really long answers.
No, thank you so much. It's really good. Yeah, very in-depth. There is a question in the chat room from Sharadeya Devi. And her question is, Hare Krishna, dear Chidi Shakti Devi, thank you for the inspiring class. Could you elaborate on the difference between our human need for love and our spiritual need for love? That's one question. And then second part is, also, can you give some practical examples how we can relate to our family members as Krishna, part and parcel, as Krishna's part and parcels, even if they aren't practicing devotees? Beautiful question.
Okay, thank you. I'm just going to have a look at that question because I know there's two parts to it.
Yeah.
Could you on the difference between our human need for love and our spiritual need for love? Okay. Our spiritual need for love is our relationship with Krishna. Okay, it's fully satisfying and it has a core identity, rasa, or mood. And it's not just fully satisfying, it has no beginning or end. It's ever increasing. And ultimately, just like Krishna says, the soul can't be cut, it can't be burned, it can't be dried up, and is amazing. So is our relationship with Krishna. It actually can't be destroyed. It can only be covered. Our human need for love can be interrupted. It can be unfulfilled and is ever changing and will never be fully satisfying until it's connected with our spiritual need for love. So when we're talking about the human need for love, there's many different aspects of it. There is the physical exchange of love. We know people who have, just by getting hugs, the healing process is activated in the body. And this is why we'll often read, research shows us that babies, when they're born, if they're immediately held by the mother, this has the certain hormones like oxytocin are released by the brain, which increases the bond between the mother and the child. It's also something that releases stress, makes you feel relaxed, and so your immune system strengthens by. So there's this physiological side for love, and it's not just mother and child; it's there in all different relationships. Where there's this mood of love, as in serving, it's heightened. Where there's a mood of exploitation, then it deprives us. And sadly, exploitation is also there in every aspect of the human experience of relationships. Then there's the emotional human need for love. That which we exchange on the human wireless network. So sending each other loving thoughts and feelings. I mean, often when we're in challenging situations with devotees, if we can't approach them directly, we can always, in our mind and heart, send them loving thoughts, conversation, and feelings. And it will inevitably have an impact because feelings, thoughts, and sound bypass the conscious mind. They reach the unconscious mind, subconscious mind, and subtle body far more powerfully and quickly than actual face-to-face conversation, especially if someone's not receptive. So, and then the third thing to consider is that the human need for love takes different forms. It needs to take different forms. Bhaktivinoda Thakur elaborates on this much more, that he really emphasizes that there are things that we need in our human experience here to facilitate gaining our divine experience of love. And so it's very important that we look after those things. It's not Maya, especially if our motive is ultimately to surrender. It's really about motive. But without the motive to serve Krishna, we can have everything perfectly balanced here for some period of time, because perfection doesn't last. And what we need at any given moment is going to change. But when it's coupled with that service to Krishna, then even when those things go off balance from time to time, it doesn't destabilize us so much. So in this we can apply these principles even with our family members or friends who are not devotees. So ultimately, if we're trying to relate to each other in a way that's pleasing to Krishna and is good for their spiritual life also, whenever we come from a position of love or surrender, Krishna will give us the intelligence of how can I express my love for this person? Okay, even in difficult relationships, even where there's exploitation and abuse, sometimes that intelligence means I have to love from a distance. The most loving thing I can do is create some space so this person doesn't continue to hurt their own devotional creeper. To actually really be in a situation where we, at that, Uttamadhikari level, seeing everybody through divine vision, takes time. But even when we get there, we still have to behave and interact in this world as if we know that, but we still have to take it at face value because they don't know who they are. Right? So we can see people as parts and parcels of Krishna, but still interact with them as who they are. And that will keep our interactions loving, affectionate, but appropriate to that situation. And they'll feel it, they'll experience it. There are many ways to say no to a person. And when we say no out of love, it's amazing. If we say no to someone out of love, they actually feel cared for, not humiliated. It's a very unusual experience. Think about it in your close relationships. Perhaps you've had these experiences with the spiritual master, maybe with Krishna directly, where you've been refused something. But because you were refused out of love, maybe you've had it with your parents. You actually felt cared for rather than rejected. So yeah, sometimes it's difficult with family, walking that tightrope of how much should I give them, how much should I take, given that they're not consciously connecting with Krishna yet. But if we're sincere, Krishna will help us. He carries what we lack and enhances what we have. There isn't a moment that can really separate us from Krishna, just if we allow those moments to be obstructed, by different things. So thank you, Sharadia. You always have wonderful questions, so thank you.
Hare Krishna, thank you. I hope Sharadia Devi is very pleased with the answer. Any more questions from anyone else? See, Mother, I never actually thought of zip file, but the way you said it makes a whole lot of sense, because I remember once Guru Govinda Maharaj was giving class, and whoever knows Guru Govinda Maharaj is really much known for very, very long Bhagavatam classes. He would speak for like a minimum of 3 hours. So he used to say that just by picking just one word from translation or Srila Prabhupada's paper, you can speak on it for months.
Yes.
Because like you were saying, each word is a zip file, depending on one's attunement or connection with Krishna. Now, my question is the difference or the similarities of culture and spirituality. You talked about the importance and the need of hugs. Like when a mom hugs the baby, it releases oxytocin and other biological things, which helps with the bonding. There is also a proven study that when a baby is crying and the mother picks up the baby learns that he is loved. In some cultures, especially like the culture I come from, they used to say that when the baby is crying, just let him cry. He will stop, But studies is proving that when the baby is crying and the mother or the relatives pick the baby up, the baby learns to understand that I'm very much loved. Previous verses of this same chapter we're reading, when Krishna entered into Dwaraka, his wives, when they met him, when they came to meet him, they were itching to hug him, but they couldn't do that because of cultural barriers, And so it was also said that when Krishna left Dwaraka to go to Vrindavan, all the wives had to stay in their homes. When your husband leaves you, you don't go anywhere else, and you don't hug anybody. And when you hug, you lose some of your spiritual power. And I'm thinking about the Western world. Hugging is very common. And I remember when I first moved to the US, it wasn't so easy for me to hug. Now I'm used to. I wouldn't say I like it, but it's very easy for me to hug. So my question is, there are certain things we practice in devotional service, and we're not sure whether it is a cultural based or it is real spiritual based. So that is why I'm asking, how do we know whether this particular practice is just cultural, and depending on where you are at, you may choose to act that way or not? And which one is spiritual, that it doesn't matter your geographical location and your practices, you still have to follow it. How do we know?
That's a great question. How do we know what's primary and what's secondary? That is essentially what you're asking, right? See, because if you ask any devotee, you can take 100 devotees and you ask them, what are the primary principles of Krishna consciousness? They'll all say the same thing. There'll be no dispute. You start asking them about the secondary things. Do we hug? Do we not hug? Do they eat pasta in the spiritual world? Do they not eat pasta in the spiritual world? Should women preach? Should they not preach? Should they be giving Bhagavatam class? Should they be leading it? You ask these secondary things. Should we, hug, like you said, should we hug? Should we not hug? Should we be nice to children? Should we be strict to them? These are secondary things. You ask 100 devotees their opinion, you'll get 100 different answers.
All right.
So the reason we get 100 different answers is because secondary things are seen from the vision of, okay, the way this is being executed, is it going to help my devotional service or is it going to hinder it? Okay, so if you're not used to hugging and you're suddenly told, hugs are really good in spiritual life, if you're going to get so mental about it, it's going to make you so rigid. Oh my God, I don't want to hug anybody. I mean, you're going to be sitting there chanting, going, oh my God, when I get up, I'm going to have to hug devotees. Hare Krishna. It's like you're going to go mental. You're not going to be able to focus on Krishna's name. And vice versa. If you're used to hugging and you enter a culture where nobody's ever going to touch you, right? You're going to start feeling dried up and like, what? Nobody likes. What is this? So culture is important, and every culture is acceptable to Krishna. Because everything in the material world can be used as a stepping stone to serving Krishna. Even Tamagun. Krishna doesn't say you can't come to me via Tama and Rajagun. So he doesn't say you can't come through me through ignorance and passion. He just says it's really, 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 really hard. Okay? So he says use goodness as your launch pad and then get to Sattvaguna, which is even higher. So it's not that we can't, but we have to look at our culture. We have to look at our adhikar, because ultimately when we do start getting to that point where actually it's very easy to drop and accept what we need. I remember Gurudev once saying to me, because you're only a woman as long as you need it and it's useful in your spiritual life. Otherwise, chuck it away. You're only a doctor in as much as you need it for, service. Otherwise, chuck it to the side. You don't need any of that. Only take it, accept it, and use it if it's useful in devotional service. So you should be able to throw it off, wear it. So same as we become more like that, then even our cultural attitudes and attributes, they become more fluid, they become more flexible. Even our personality doesn't become something that we have to adhere to and hold on to, because what is personality? It's just a psychosocial imprint in this lifetime. We've had so many personalities before, so we don't have to, as our true nature becomes more steady, then it is easier to change our personality, not in a fake, facetious kind of manipulative way, but in a, I can adapt for you. That's fine. You need me, just like Krishna. You know, he adapts for all his wives, doesn't he? Sometimes he's the henpecked husband, you know, who's being nagged and bossed around, and sometimes he's the dominant one, you know, and he has a timid wife. So it's so this how much does culture affect it? This is why like-minded association is so important. That's why the 6 loving exchanges are so important. That be genuine, be real, be authentic. Be authentic according to what things are like now, because in 5 years, what's authentic is going to be different, especially if we're progressing. And don't judge others. Live and let live, you know?
Yeah. Beautiful answers. Thank you so much. By the way, Sharadia Mataji answered. She said she's extremely satisfied with the answer. Professor Samputra has a question. I believe it's a question. So you may unmute.
Yeah, he has something to say anyway.
Yeah.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Yeah, thank you so much for the beautiful answer that you gave and the beautiful question that was raised. Yeah, that was because 2 days ago I was having a conversation with a god brother over here, and you know, this question about, you know, cultural perspective and hug in a devotional environment, and so we're doing some, you know, reflection, and we saw that some devotees have, even in relationship, have been a bit distant, even in marriage. And, you know, hug is a very important tool. Even scientifically wise, you know, hug alone can break down stroke. It boosts the immune system. It makes you feel loved. And this is also healthy for our devotional self. You can have a peace of mind to be able to chant properly. But, you know, when maybe cultural setting comes in, and we are always into the rules and regulation perspective, and you are lacking this in your life, and it affects the mind. You cannot even chant properly. Oh, I think the answer, the question that was asked, and the perfect answer that was given, come on, was so, it really hit the nail. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much. So thank you again. Hey, Grace Sharadia has a question. You may unmute and ask a question, Mataji.
Hare Krishna, Chiti Shakti.
Sharadia, we've lost your voice.
Yeah, Sharadia, you are muted. You have, okay, good.
Hare Krishna, can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you, yes.
Thank you so much for the class. I've really been appreciating it. So I have another question related to our family dynamics. And you were mentioning that we've got to move beyond, you know, either having like a exploitative mentality, and then when things are not going the way we wanted, moving into avoidance, and we just have to serve. Now, I've seen, like, I observed this in my own mind, that, you know, I try to like, you know, serve my family members, serve my friends, but still I observe this tendency in my mind of like, you know, the mind is asking, but what are they going to do for me? What am I going to get out of this? When are they going to, you know, give to me? So how do we overcome that? Is there a point where, you know, that goes away, or is that just something that we, you know, over time we just observe it, but we just ignore it? Because I'm just wondering, like, can we overcome that, like, kind of that selfish, you know, that selfish voice that is kind of like pushing us to not only be, you know, thinking about how we can serve and how we can give.
That's thank you for your question. Yeah, what can I get out of it? What can I get out of it? This is one of the biggest problems we have, even as human beings, in even just entering human loving relationships. People are so scared to have their hearts broken that they won't even dare get into any kind of relationship. But that mindset is already just, all it's doing is protecting a heart that's already broken. Because really, if we're waiting around for someone to give us something before we're willing to offer something back, we're going to be waiting a long time. The hard answer to that is keep giving and observe that my mind still has expectations. And the process, if we engage with it sincerely and properly, it works. We will come to a point where we are receiving such reciprocation that the mind is not seeking that. It's not looking in the wrong place for reciprocation. But there's also a way to look at it in this world, because there can be some distance between where we're at now and actually directly, consistently experiencing Krishna's reciprocation. And that is that even if we look at it based on the laws of karma, laws of karma state whatever we put out, we'll get back. There's no two ways about it. But sometimes one thing we get confused about is we think if I put something there, my reward has to come from the same place or same person. As you live and get older, you'll see. Actually, it's not quite like that. Where we invest doesn't mean the return will come from that same place or same person. It just means, yeah, there'll be a return, but it may come, it will come from a person that you may least expect it from, and at a time when you need it most, right? We dictate things on, okay, I want it now, and I want it from this place and this person, because I gave it now, and I gave it to this person and this place, so where's my reward? Okay, it's funny how we don't do that with unhealthy actions, right? We don't say, oh, I did it now, I should get the repercussions now. Like, okay, Krishna, can you just like delay the repercussions? It was something, I did something wrong, like give me a chance to repair things. No, but with the things that we do where we're investing love and affection or time or resource, if it doesn't come through the channel we expected, if we trust Krishna, that it will come back, and it will come back when we most need it, because he's ultimately making sure that our life is designed for us. You know, so sometimes we see that, again, looking at families or friends, there's some relationships where it looks like literally the relationship is so one-sided. One person seems to be investing a lot. Okay, that can't continue forever. There will either be a redress of balance, or that person who's investing a lot in somebody else is actually getting all the reciprocation, but from everybody else except that person. And so this is also about recognizing how and through who is Krishna reciprocating with me, rather than my idea of who Krishna should reciprocate with me through. Because ultimately, as we surrender more, Krishna bypasses even that person's personality and their logic and their reasoning and their words, and just works directly through them, you know, to influence our life and to affect us. So for now, observe that it's still there. Sometimes that's all that's required. But depending on how much you're willing to do this, just keep giving, and you'll see that actually Krishna's already reciprocating. Just need to learn to recognize it.
Hare Krishna, thank you so much.
I just wanted to make one last point. How do we, I mean, that can raise a question, how do we recognize Krishna's voice? Someone asked this question in their Sangha last week. When someone becomes familiar to us, their voice becomes easily recognizable. So let's familiarize ourselves with Krishna more. Reading and chanting is not just a philosophical, dry exercise. It's a live, active, multi-sensory, dynamic engagement with the source of everything, with an all-attractive, completely loving person. So let's become familiar with him, so familiar that we can recognize his voice anywhere and through anyone.
Hare Krishna. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful questions. and more beautiful, beautiful answers.
Prabhu, I'm conscious of taking up everybody's time, so you do tell us when we need to end.
No, we can go as long as you want to. You see, the devotees are still here. Most of the time, the devotees, because devotees are by nature wise, they prefer hearing than talking. So they are absorbing all what you're giving us. But I happen to be like a parrot. I always like to talk. Okay. Madam Rector Rennie says it is a very nectarian class. Thank you, Madam Rennie. See, you talked about Guru Tattva.
Mm.
As nasty, as obnoxious as I am, if I take seriously what my Guru has given me, I have my passport, I have my visa, and I have my aircraft to go back to the spiritual world in this particular lifetime. And so when we chant the Guru Vandanam, we say that the spiritual master is my Lord birth after birth. I mean, no disciple in his sane mind would ever like to accept service from the Guru. The disciple always wants to render service to the Guru. But as I understand, because as loving entities, our original nature is that of a service. And so the spiritual master, of course, he is also a disciple, so he's also rendering service. But when we all meet in the spiritual world, if I'm lucky to find myself in the spiritual world, and I find Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj offering me service, how do I offer that service? But he is also going to will to serve me, because in our original nature, we serve. So I am just imagining myself in the spiritual world and having this uncomfortable situation where I do not want to be served, and my spiritual master still wants to serve me. So my question is, doesn't such a situation create some sort of discomfort in the spiritual world, whereby the spiritual world is supposed to be a place free of discomfort, free of anxiety? This is just a silly question I have for you, Mother Chiri Shakti.
Sure. No, it does not create an awkward situation. I'll tell you why. So just like in this, our gurus are serving us. Whether we see it as service or not, by instructing us, they're serving us. By investing time in molding us and correcting us, they're serving us. And we accept the service and we reciprocate. Actually, nothing makes a guru more happy than when we submissively inquire and accept their service, right? Inquiry, when there's inquiry, we're actually saying, can you engage in serving me by giving me an answer? And by following through on the instructions, we are reciprocating with their service, and it makes them happy. Yeah. In the spiritual world, it's the same, because there isn't this restrictive, when we have a restrictive idea of how we should engage in service for the spiritual master, it makes the relationship with the spiritual master difficult, because we're putting boundaries and parameters. In the spiritual world, there's none of these boundaries and parameters. Again, it's feeling. So just like Krishna's friends allow him to massage their feet, just like Arjun allows Krishna to drive his chariot, he knows it gives Krishna pleasure. So he serves Krishna by allowing Krishna to have that pleasure. Mm. It's like sometimes as devotees, we find it so hard to accept a compliment. No, I did nothing. You know what you're saying? When someone's giving you a gift of a compliment, you're saying, take your gift back, I don't want it. Have you ever tried giving someone a gift and they just push it back in your face? It's not nice, is it? Yeah. So actually, we are already accepting service from the spiritual master. But if we accept it out of love, it pleases them. And it gives, then in some way, Krishna is reciprocating with them through us. So I know we don't like to think of it in that way, but they don't have to. These souls who agree to be endowed, who become willing and qualified to be endowed by Guru Tattva, because Guru Tattva can be removed. You can be taken out of Guru Tattva. And those who are willing to be available and qualified to be endowed by Guru Tattva, they have already decided to serve everybody in a particular way. So we're already accepting service. It's just when we're in the spiritual world together, it takes a more organic form. Even here, everybody's got different relationships with their gurus. Some have a very fluid relationship with their guru. They're available to be whatever their guru needs them to be. And others have a very clear idea of, I can serve in this way and I can't serve in that way. So yes, your question is not a silly one though, but again, it reflects how our mind can get. You see what I mean? We can overthink relationship to a point where we get paralysis through analysis.
Thank you so much. There is some loving exchanges on the chat platforms. Prema Samputa, Lilamrita says, thank you so much, beautiful class. And then Prema Samputa says, I love the flow of such lecture. Thanks so much. Sharadia, profound answer. We should continue to serve others and become aware of how Krishna is already reciprocating with us. And then Rupa. This is Rupa Devi or Rupa Das or Rupa Prabhu? Okay, Rupa. Hare Krishna. Thank you so much for today's class, full of richness, depth, and insight. So those are some lovely.
You're all kind. It's all because of you, actually. You can't, this service of, you were talking about, wise souls want to hear. And you guys have just engaged me in speaking. But actually, I can only say anything because you've given me permission. And you've given me heartfelt permission. So it's all being drawn out by you. I'm only doing as much as you allow me to. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much.
So I think maybe on now we end. Is that okay?
I think so. I saw a familiar name here. Shilpesh. Do I know you somewhere?
Horrible. I don't know. Are you on the Wusu program?
I think I've met you on the Bhagavatam class from Mayapur.
No, I don't think so. I don't join that one.
Prabhu is one of our devotees here in London. He's very.
Okay. So I think that's where I found your name. Okay, Hare Krishna. Do you have anything to say?
No, it was a wonderful class. It was lovely to Chitta Shakti Mataji.
It was kind. Thank you.
Okay.
It was so good to be with all of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So if devotees filled with nectar, somebody said when you are really, really drunk, you don't even have the ability to talk. So I guess that's what has happened to the devotees. Whether you've overgiven them what they need to drink, and now they are all drunk. So we're going to ask the devotees to unmute themselves, and then we chant beg Hare Krishna to express our appreciation for Mother's class. Right. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare. Yeah. All glories to her great Shakti Devi ki jai.
Yeah.
Thank you. Haribo.
Very well. Thank you.
Thank you. Hare Krishna. Thank you so much.
Hare Krishna.
Now it's time for prasad.
Yes, it's time for prasad.
Gangara Parasha Srila Prabhupada Patita Baba.
He's a kind and gentle soul. His heart is never cold. So peaceful and poetic, with a message true and bold. He's never seeking praise, so silent and so grave. And his transcendental love is the magic in his ways. And when I see his love, I know I've got a long, long way to go. When will I taste the love that he is feeling inside? He's always meek and mild, with a warm and friendly smile, so simple in his living, singing all the while. He sings out Krishna's name, his glory and his fame, to serve his Lord and Master, in pleasure or in pain. And when I see his love, I know I've got a long, long way to go. When will I taste the love that he is feeling inside?
Hare Krishna. So thank you all. You all have a wonderful weekend. And by Guru Krishna's grace, we'll meet again next week.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Good to see you, Shri Prema.
Hare Krishna, big
Hare
brother.
Krishna.
Yeah.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much.
Hare
Good to see
Krishna.
you, family.
Hare
Oh, Shri
Govinda.
Govinda, Govinda.
Yeah. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Krishna.
Where are you? Where are you now, Prabhu?
Croatia, Zagreb.
Are you in Croatia? Okay.
Yeah, yeah, but I'll be traveling to Ghana next week for 1 month. Yeah.
Ah, okay.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah. Thank you so
Hare
much.
Krishna.
Wonderful.
Hare Krishna.